CEO of IndyCar, talking for the first time about the crash that killed Dan Wheldon. It was a day, of course, that touched all of us. But none of us experienced it like Randy Bernard. He is IndyCar's CEO, but he is also a husband and father. Until now, he hasn't talked about what happened right after the crash and why he made the decisions he did. Tonight, Randy Bernard on the day that changed the sport forever.
I think that November and December were probably two of the worst 2 months of my entire life. It didn't end.
Randy Bernard, the man who found himself in the center of the firestorm of attacks after the tragic crash that killed Dan Wheldon.
As you're reading all this negativity, you want to do the same thing, but you also know that this isn't the time. It hurt tremendously, and it didn't quit hurting.
Lost one of my best friends.
Everybody in the IndyCar series considered Dan a friend. I mean, you saw the reaction.
It's certainly very difficult for everyone in the community.
Trouble contact and a huge crash. Up in turn number 2. Oh, multiple cars involved.
It's the fiery crash that devastated the racing world and touched our hearts. Dan Wheldon, IndyCar superstar, husband and father, gone in an instant.
IndyCar is very sad to announce that Dan Wheldon has passed away.
Almost immediately after this announcement, the finger-pointing started, aimed mostly at Bernard.
He doesn't know anything about the cars.
People who work with Bernard, even back in his days at the Professional Bull Riders, will tell you he is one of the most genuine and caring in the business, always putting the safety of his athletes first. But now people outside the sport were criticizing Bernard for the decision to race on the oval in Las Vegas, accusing him of putting entertainment before safety.
I've always wanted to do what's in the best interest of the athlete.
For the very first time tonight, Randy Bernard tells me what only those close to him knew. You're about to find out what really happened in the moments and days just after the crash. You're going to see his response to the nasty headlines, and he tells me why he decided not to talk about it until now.
It was a time to show respect for the Wheldon family and to take a step back and make sure that our priorities were straight on what was first, and that was the Wheldon family.
That also meant blocking out the attacks, like this one from NASCAR driver Jimmy Johnson.
Creating situations to get the car off the ground at a high rate of speed, and you can't control the car when it's off the ground.
The IndyCar family fires back.
He needs to shut up and keep his opinions to himself.
I heard quotes of cold-blooded promoter and just those type of comments.
What does that feel like?
There's no feeling in the world that can describe it.
Do you think the media has been unfair?
I think that there's two types of media. I think there's the media that believe in the sport and want to see it do well, but also are going to give their opinions on it. But I also think that there's the sensationalists, and we saw that come out over the Dan Wheldon crisis. And I think that they don't care to be fair. They have one job, and that's to drive their ratings any which way they can, whoever they step on. Those were some of the ones that probably made attacks that I felt were unfair.
Does it make you angry?
There comes a point when you just turn your TV off, you set your newspaper down.
That day was numbing, and it's still painful for Bernard to watch the accident, reliving the moments just after the crash.
Whenever you see a wreck, you hold your breath. But you see this and you just see so many cars flying, and that's when you're saying serious prayers.
What was an hour, he says, seemed like an eternity. Were there tears at that point?
Oh, there was a lot of tears in that room.
At one point, he says the drivers actually wanted to restart the race, everyone looking to him for the final signal.
After seeing the emotions in that room, I felt it wasn't in our best interest to restart the race. And out of respect to Dan, I made the decision to stop the race.
The 5-lap tribute showed their solidarity. 2 months later, the findings of the investigation negated all those attacks. It was impossible for anyone to anticipate the crash. Today, Bernard isn't bitter. He's focused on moving forward. The drivers front and center, crowd favorites everywhere they went for Super Bowl 46. The IndyCar race cars decorating the city, representing every NFL team.
I heard it was the very first time that the NFL has allowed their logo on any other sport.
And 3 new IndyCar races this season: China, Montana, and the Motor City, Detroit. As far as racing on ovals like Las Vegas again,
we're taking a step back and evaluating and determining what the long-term strategy is with those ovals.
Not only in parts, but also in personnel.
The biggest focus right now is debuting the new Dallara chassis.
We are in a range of 56, 57 cars.
This safer, new and improved race car is Indy's first new car in 8 years, with $60 million invested in the new turbocharged engine. The new car, dubbed the DW12, in honor of Dan Wheldon.
This race car here is the car that he'd worked so hard to improve. So I think that that will always have a special meaning. I hope in 5 or 10 years, when I'm at the end of this tenure somewhere down the road, that the drivers will say the same things that bull riders say, because that's very important to me. I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror when I'm done here and say that I did the very best thing I could for the sport, for the drivers, the team owners.
And again, the first race of the season is in Dan Wheldon's hometown of St. Petersburg, Florida. The final investigation into that crash found this, quote, "While several factors coincided to produce the perfect storm, none of them can be singled out as the sole cause of the accident." Bottom line, this was a crash and a tragedy that was unpredictable. And Bob, you know, in talking to Randy about this experience, you can see why the drivers, why the owners, why so many in IndyCar admire him. You know, the strength of his leadership is really the strength of his character and his integrity. It's going to be interesting to see where he takes the sport from here.
And